We'll get started. We only have a 1 hour limitation.
Oh yeah.
저기 접시 있거든요.
Maybe after.
We have 4 different types of pizzas. I hope you enjoy every one of them. Yeah. Please have a seat. Welcome.
다시 마시면 돼요. 아. 이게 좀 영양분 있고.
Good? How about you? Good? So this time your Korean team, you just sit down, lay back and relax, and you can enjoy American team's presentation today. And at the end of the presentation, the Korean team members will get prize if you can answer some of these questions. So please pay attention to their presentation. And during the presentation, you just feel freely to go to pizzas and enjoy your meal. Alright. And everyone has a seat? What about you, Tina? Can you sit? Okay. Alright, let's get started. Please welcome our first presenter, Grace.
Okay, I'm Grace. I'm going to start a presentation on America with presenting of money. So I have some examples right here. So we have a lot more denominations than you guys do. We have 1, 5, 10, 20, 50, and 100. So like a $1 is kind of equivalent to 1,001. The $2 isn't in print, we don't really use that, but it's still circulating around. But I'll just go over the people. They're usually presidents or people that have contributed to the founding of the country. So the $1 bill has George Washington on it, which is our first president. The $5 bill has Abraham Lincoln, which is our 16th president. And the 20 has Andrew Jackson. Yeah, this is our 7th president. But and then these are coins. I don't have any right now, but the coins. And a note about money is that the price listed on items are not what you're going to pay. They're going to add taxes to the price listed, and these taxes is money that the government uses to fund certain projects around the country. So if something's like $1, expect to pay like $1.07 or something like that. So the next topic is food. This is, to me, and I guess this is typical American breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So for breakfast, we have like eggs and pancakes and waffles and a lot of different meats like bacon and sausage. And then for lunch, it's hamburgers, hot dogs, or pizza, and sandwiches. And then for dinner, it's usually like steak or chicken with 2 like vegetables or something like that. And point about eating out is that you have to tip the people that serve you. If you go to like a sit-down restaurant, and tipping is when you add like an extra few dollars to the total cost to thank your server for serving you. I know it's not like common here, but in America, expect to tip your server. But I mean, for fast food chains like McDonald's or Burger King, you don't really need to tip. Like, they don't really, you just get your food and you serve. You don't need to serve. But, is there anything else?
During the presentation, you can ask questions.
I made a little presentation for the landmarks in the US. I hope it works. How do I like go to the next one?
It looks like the map's on the slide.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, so alright, so this is my presentation, USA landmarks. Just ignore these captions, they're just for like humorous effect. Yeah, so most of the landmarks are on the coasts, so that's why I put those there, just to fill the space. But these aren't in any specific order. So the first is Times Square. You guys probably all heard of this. It's in one of the biggest cities in the US, New York City, in New York. And it's pretty much like super far south in New York. And this is Times Square on New Year's. So there's a popular like ball drop. So when everyone counts down to the new year and the ball drops and everyone has a party. It's also famous for shopping and food places. Next we have the Golden Gate Bridge. Golden Gate Bridge, probably the most photographed bridge internationally, and it's about 2.7 kilometers, and it's considered a wonder of the modern world by the American Society of Architecture. So it's very beautiful, as you can see. And there's also Golden Gate Park, where there's nature stuff and some exhibits you can visit. Next we have the Space Needle. You guys will probably go here. I haven't been here, but I heard it was awesome. And at the top there's a rotating restaurant, and you can see the skyline of Seattle, like in the background, as well as the Olympic and Cascade Mountain ranges around the city, so that's cool. Alright, next we have our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. This is where our federal government is located, pretty much. We have a few major landmarks here. We have the Capitol building. This is commonly photographed as well. These monuments are to pay respects to our presidents. So we have the Washington Monument, is this giant obelisk right here, and the Lincoln Memorial, which is right here. And the Lincoln Memorial is on the penny, as you saw earlier in Grace's presentation. This right here is the Supreme Court building, so that's where the Supreme Court does their cases, and it's also very big. This isn't a great picture, but and it's hard to see in the picture, so I just added another one. This is the White House, and that's where the president lives. It's equivalent to the Blue House in Korea, I guess. Then we go to Florida. Florida, popular for Disney World. As you can see right here, Magic Kingdom, and that's where all the Disney princesses and characters are. And this commemorates Walt Disney, who is the founder of Disney Heritage District. And within Disney World, there's also this Epcot Center, and this is kind of educational and science and nature center that has a lot of exhibits inside. Alright, next to that is Universal Studios, the Universal Resort in Orlando. And this has a lot of theme parks related to the Universal movies, because they have live action movies. And one of my favorites, Harry Potter World. It's just, they recreate the Hogwarts and Hogsmeade and all that, and it's great. Alright, here in Nevada, we have Las Vegas Strip, and this is popular for its casinos and like gambling. A lot of people come here to gamble and just party. And there are many convention centers and like high-rises that you see, and also a variety of shows in the theaters. In Arizona, we have the Grand Canyon, and this is a large canyon structure carved by the Colorado River, and it's 450 kilometers long, so it's huge. And you can, if you go to the Grand Canyon, you can like walk beside it, I guess. In Minnesota is the Mall of America. It's not the same as the National Mall, which is in DC, but it's bigger than the National Mall. And the Mall of America, there's roller coasters, theaters, shops inside, and there's a statistic. If you spend 10 minutes in each store, it'll take 86 hours to visit all the stores in the mall. So it's quite big. This is only one extension of it, but if you see the whole thing, it's like, it's giant. Last but not least, we have Alaska, and Alaska is famous for their cruises and being able to see the Aurora Borealis, also known as the Northern Lights. And if you go there on a cruise from September to April and go to Fairfax County, I think it was, you can see the Northern Lights, and it's very pretty. And that's my presentation.
Hey everybody, my name's Kieran. I'm going to be talking about holidays in America. And right here I just have a little outline of what I'm going to be talking about. Some holidays that you guys probably have heard of or maybe even celebrate. New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, Christmas and Easter. And then we have some others like Halloween, Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and Independence Day. From the familiar holidays, which hopefully I'm not telling you things you already know, but New Year's Eve and Day in America, we watched the ball drop in New York City, which Aaron covered a little bit when he showed that picture of New York. Basically, it's just this big ball that they drop as soon as it's the new year and everybody celebrates. You drink champagne like as soon as it goes into the new year, and you kiss your significant other. Christmas, we just do like standard Christmas tree presents, maybe you go to church. Easter, we have an Easter egg hunt maybe, and we paint Easter eggs, and maybe church. Halloween in America, you get to dress up in a silly or scary costume. If you have kids or if you are a kid, you go door to door, you get candy. Halloween's known for having like really big, like special parties because everybody kind of like goes all out with the decorations.
Kira, until what age did you participate for Halloween?
It's different for everybody. Probably 14 maybe.
14.
Yeah, as long as you can get people together to like go do it, it's fun. Really, I would have fun if I went trick or treating right now. Thanksgiving, it's ceremonial to honor a feast between the Native Americans and the European settlers in America. Basically, it's just like to mark like the friendship between everyone. there's a huge feast with turkey, cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, and everybody's family has like their own other things that they bring. We always do mashed sweet potatoes with like marshmallows on top, which is really good. But like I said, everybody has something special that they bring. And also it's one of the holidays that you get like your whole extended family together. Sometimes this is like the only time that I see like some of my aunts and uncles that live really far away, so it's nice to like get everybody together. Black Friday is right before Thanksgiving, and basically it's just a day with a whole bunch of like really big sales. The only reason I put this as an American holiday is because it's sort of notorious for like the silly stuff people will do. They'll like wait outside like days before the store opens to get like the big sale on a flat screen TV or something. Some people like get hurt in like the mob of people that go in to get the sale, but that's just part of the holiday spirit. Independence Day, which is the 4th of July, which just happened. It's when we celebrated our independence from Great Britain. We eat American food, like Grace said. We get together with friends, maybe have a pool party, fireworks. It's like our day to fulfill every American stereotype.
Hi guys, I'm Nathan. I'm going to talk a little bit about campus life in America. Like since I've been here and kind of like noticed Korean campus life, it's pretty much the same where kids kind of go off to college, kind of live their own life for a little bit, have some fun, take some classes. One of the cool things about American campuses is just like the sheer amount of clubs that someone can join. And the cool thing about that is since colleges have a larger population than most high schools, you'll end up finding kids with a bunch of different interests that like kind of align with yours. And you'll be able to like make more friends through your different interests, and that's like a lot of fun. And also, most universities, they'll have like a involvement day where all the clubs will get together and kind of like set up a booth like you see here, and kids will walk around and like figure out what are the different like clubs and organizations that can get involved in. Also, another huge part about American campuses is Greek life, and it's kind of so it's split into two things: fraternities and sororities. And what they are is just kind of like a group of people that form sort of like a brotherhood or a sisterhood. And they're pretty much just become friends and become close throughout their time in college. And a lot of them end up going out to do like great things afterwards too. Like I was reading all of the 11 Apollo astronauts were all involved in Greek life. So that's something cool. And if you see here all these Greek letters, that's how you know what fraternity or sorority, and they kind of are represented with their Greek letters, and there's like those become like a part of whichever one you went to based on what your parents did or just kind of like what your interests are. So that's Greek life. Also, another huge thing about campus life, like in Korea, is the drinking culture. Every weekend, kids will go out and have fun. You see the Natural Light and the Vladimir, those are kind of the bottom tier alcohols because they're really cheap and kids don't really care about the taste, they're just trying to get drunk. So you'll usually find those at like house parties or apartment parties that kids throw because unlike in South Korea, the drinking age is 21. So a lot of freshmen and first and second year students, they can't go out to the bars. So kind of the upperclassmen will hold like house parties for them to come to, and so they can like blow some steam. But also when you do turn 21, a lot of the individuals end up going out to the bars instead of staying at home, just because it's a different environment from their home, and they can meet a bunch of new people that they probably wouldn't have met anyways. So that concludes my bit. I don't know.
Awesome. Thank you for the presentation. And Nate, could you tell us about the different names of you talked about
kids, like boys and girls, they
Uh.
live separately, so,
Mhm.
do you call the house with the same word? or-
Okay, so like I said, there's split into fraternities, which are all guys, and then sororities are all girls. And then they'll just identify themselves by their Greek letters. I'm not in a frat, so I don't really know what any of them mean. But you'll just hear kids are from such and such frat, and
Zeta
then
Tau Alpha.
yeah, exactly.
Chi Omega Psi.
Pi Psi.
Pi Psi.
Yeah. So they'll identify with their like house kind of.
Alright. Thank you for the presentation. And what about your questions? I think the Korean team will have a lot of questions about American campus lives and American culture. You can freely ask them.
Then if you buy any goods in store, I have to check the price and multiply some your taxes.
So it depends on the state you live in, like the percentage of tax on certain items. So I think in North Carolina it's 7 cents on a dollar, so 7%. So you would multiply the price by 0.07 and then add it to the price.
But I think it's like 6.75%.
Yeah, but it's different between different states.
Yeah.
We all have different taxes, and some I think even don't.
Yeah, some states have theirs.
Some states don't, and so, I mean, it's just, you gotta look it up, I guess, or just test it out and buy something and see what happens.
And the interesting thing are these places where there's some states that have no taxes, and then some that do. So in my state, the state of Washington, we don't have income tax. But the state of Oregon next to us has sales tax. So to compensate, we have very high sales tax. So we have like 10%, sometimes 12% when we go out to eat. We don't have income tax. So people that live on the border of Oregon and Washington, they'll live in Washington so they don't get an income tax, right next to the border, and then they go buy everything over across the border in a town that has no sales tax. Now they're supposed to report this, but I don't think people really do.
So did you get it? And some states, they don't have a sales tax. When you buy something, you don't have to pay taxes. Like New
Groceries.
Hampshire, Oregon.
Yeah, Oregon doesn't have it, New Hampshire, and then none of them that I know of will tax you on groceries, on food. Some, well, maybe some, but most states won't. They'll tax you on everything, but they won't typically tax you for the basics.
But unfortunately, the Seattle, the city you are going to next week, they have a sales tax.
Oh
You have
yeah,
to pay
very
taxes.
high.
Yeah,
Everything you buy, you have to pay taxes.
when you go to the register, they'll tell you how
Yeah.
much it is. You don't have to like know when you get
You'll
there.
see it on the screen like, you know, they do here too, like.
It's like just think of it like for every $10 that the item is, just expect to pay close to like $1 extra.
Great question.
Yeah, what else? And we have two SKKU students who are going to UW next year. And we have another, we have two, actually, two students.
And you called it correctly, UW. Most people don't know that. University of Washington,
You know, we used to call UW, University of Washington, yeah. We have a,
There is another school called UW, University of Wisconsin, that we have a very big
oh
debate.
yeah, but more prestigious university, University of Washington. They are going to, Yuna Lee, and she's going to, and Curie Park, she's going to next year.
Ah,
Yeah, Dr. West, she probably should take your courses.
great.
Any other questions, Korean team? It's time. It's time. You can ask them questions.
What's the usual liquor that US students,
What? Can you say that again? What?
common liquor?
Common liquor. What are common alcoholic beverages, right? Yeah.
Like Nate was saying, people who aren't old enough to drink usually just drink whatever they can get, the cheap stuff. But I mean, if you're 21, then it's the same like German beers and stuff that you guys have here. There's some like microbrews that have like special stuff that's like seasonal or whatever. But for the most part, like you can probably get most of the same stuff that you find here and there, except for like soju and stuff like that. Soju.
I think for like hard liquor, a lot of students just drink like vodka or Fireball is popular.
Whiskey too.
Yeah, whiskey.
Whiskey, vodka, it's more than 20%, right? 30, 40, 40.
Sometimes in mixed drinks they put like Everclear, which is like 90%, but it's mixed, so
90%.
yeah, it's 90%.
Of alcohol?
Yeah.
Yeah, so don't drink as much as you would here because you'll get a lot of stuff.
Did you hear that? Some of the alcoholic beverages is
Yeah, be careful. In all seriousness, be careful because you'll have a higher, especially you'll be in Seattle, the beers are typically around 9%. So, and that's just the beers because a lot of them are microbrews, so be careful. But if you want to do something sophisticated around your drinking, there, right now that's trendy, at least in the Northwest, since you're going to be in Seattle, is ciders. So there's these things called ciders. And we have these trends that happen across the U.S. and that's kind of trendy right now. Different, hundreds of different kinds.
Dr. West, I think you have been teaching here like more or less a month. So did you notice any big classroom, student-to-classroom behaviors are different?
Well, I mean, the real big difference, and I anticipated this because I talked to my Korean colleagues, that students here are a little bit more quiet. And that's not always a bad thing. But if you want to start a discussion, it takes more to get everyone going. And I think that's a cultural thing. But that's not always a bad thing either, because sometimes in the US, students are too boisterous and you almost want them sort of like, okay, enough. But the open discussions and class questions, that was different. But I also noticed that sometimes the students that I've had in the classes while I was here, sometimes I didn't know quite what they know, and then when they turned in their assignment, it was always more than I would have expected. And sometimes I think American students are overconfident. They think they know more than they do, and then they don't do as well, but not always. This is a generalization. But I think the big one is sort of questioning authority, too. Again, a very cultural thing. In the US, we to a degree, we respect that. We want that sometimes. We want to question respectfully the professors and ask very good questions and things like that. They like professors in the United States really, for the most part, like good questions. And if you throw them a really good question that's respectful and not disrespectful to their authority, they'll really appreciate that.
Does those respectful questions affect their grade?
Well, I mean, it can, but I mean, it's, ultimately it will come down to the things you turn in class, of course. It's still, there's not, I mean, the one thing I will say is there's not as many differences as you would expect, maybe from the US system and the Korean system. I thought there were going to be more differences. I do see a lot of similarities. So if anything, I thought there was more similarity. But I do think, depending on the type of class, too, that you take. If you take a class from the statistics department, you may have a different experience than the information schools or history. It is, of course, very dependent. One thing you'll find in a U.S. institution is a lot of variety. The professors are from all over the world. Very heterogeneous. More so than, I think, most parts in the world. And that's part of just being, I think, the U.S. institution. It doesn't have a lot of diversity in some areas of society, but there's a lot of diversity, I think, on the U.S. campus with the professors. So that you'll see. So everyone has a different take on that.
You got it. Agree. And you will get courses which is related to your grade. So, respectful questions and participation in discussion.
It does
I think
help.
presentation will affect their grade, right?
Yes, it does. I mean, they do look upon that very favorably. If you're participating in class. It's hard though when you come in as a student, you're not from that country, and for some people in general, it's hard for them to ask questions. So, yeah, I mean that's a scary thing. But try it out.
What are some tips? This question is for you guys and Dr. West both. And what are some tips that students should not do in the classroom? Can you think
I'll
of?
let you guys
Yeah.
answer.
I mean, like Dr. West was saying, anything that's like disrespectful, like some of the stuff you can get away with it. Your professors will probably notice that you're like texting in class or whatever,
Yes,
and then
he's right about that.
and then like although maybe it doesn't directly affect your grade, then your professor thinks that you don't care about the material, and then you just don't want to get off on the wrong foot with your professor. Because they're very knowledgeable people, they can help you out if you're struggling in class and they know that you care about the material, then you can go ask them questions and they'll help you out, usually.
They'll be more willing to help you out.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. I mean, being one, and I try not to let it affect me. I usually let people use technology in my classes because it's part of how we learn now. But it's not that hard to find out if students are actually listening. So I think of all the things, I mean, I hate to say it because I wish it didn't bother me, but it kind of does if people aren't paying attention. And sometimes the material is boring, aren't completely understanding, but I wouldn't be texting back there or being on Facebook. So if you can avoid it, because there's plenty of other times during the day you can do that. So very good point. I think that's a very good suggestion.
Thank you for your, yeah, you're telling me about really good point. And everyone in this classroom should take in your mind that during the classroom, you should not use your cell phone for texting or that kind of thing. Professors think it's very disrespectful behaviors in the classroom.
Now, it's something that some of my colleagues at big companies like Amazon, they've now instituted a no technology policy in their meetings. And so industry is starting to take this on. When you walk into a meeting, you don't come with a laptop, you don't come with your technology. If you have some sort of notes or a PowerPoint, you come with it printed, and then you sit around and you talk.
Oh.
And if you're not engaged, you can leave at any time. So there's a policy that if it's not engaging you and it's not useful, just leave. And it's okay, people respect that, because then the person that's running the meeting is the one that should feel bad because no one's paying attention, so they're not running a good meeting. So yeah, so we're just trying to get people in the moment there instead of sort of lost in, because we all get lost, including myself. I get lost in my technologies.
It's good. Yeah. It's time for pop quiz, and there's one rule. When you know the answer, you just call out your name, raising your hand, right? Like Seongjung, like Hanchul, like Jiwon. This is one simple rule. Do you remember who's on the $100 bill? Remember?
She didn't say.
Who's on the $100 bill?
She didn't say.
She didn't say? Then, okay, that's not the question. Then, who's on the, only Korean team can answer, that you are not eligible to answer. You cannot take prizes, and so, who's on the $20 bill? Do you remember?
This guy.
That'd be hard to ask a lot of Americans.
You can remember? Yeah. No, who? You have to call out your name.
Yeah,
Jiwon. Yeah, I couldn't hear you. Yes, Jiwon?
Andrew
And Andrew Jackson, is it right?
Yeah.
That is for exercise. Because I want to show you how to answer those questions, but for the real.
By the way, and I also, you maybe even mentioned this, sorry if I missed it, but there is going to be a change on our $20 bill. There's going to be a woman for the first time coming here soon. First woman. And there's been a lot of debate in the US whether it should have been the $100 bill for the woman rather than the 20. But that's coming down the pipeline. We will have a woman on our dollar bill for the first time in history.
do they know who it is already?
They haven't released it, but it's likely, they've announced that it's 98% gonna be on the $20 bill, but they don't, it's gonna be a big deal, who's it gonna be? I mean, who should it be, I don't know.
And Jiwon, you have a priority for the first question. For the first question, if you know the answer, then you will get the prize. The first question is, who's on the $5 bill? Jiwon, you have a priority.
I don't know.
Do you know the answer?
No.
No? And another person? Call out your name. Anji? Abraham Lincoln, is it right?
Yeah.
Okay, come on up. You can find out who's on the $5 bill here. Yeah, could you show what it is inside?
돈 주는 거예요?
Is it Abraham Lincoln? Good. This is not exercise, and this is real. Second question. What landmark is shown on the penny? Penny is 1 cent.
Vasco, that's hard.
What landmark is shown on the penny?
We don't care. We don't use pennies.
It's true. I mean, I wouldn't even have to think, maybe I guess it's either the Lincoln Memorial or one of the, is it Lincoln
Yeah,
Memorial?
is it Washington?
It's in Washington, D.C.
Can you give them a little hint? The
Clues.
USA team? It's in Washington?
The president is on the dollar, like the one after that.
Jiwon?
White House?
White House? No.
Memorial of Lincoln.
You have to call out your name.
Ahanji.
Hyunji?
Memorial for Lincoln.
Lincoln Memorial Lincoln? Which one is right? Lincoln Memorial?
Lincoln Memorial.
Oh, Lincoln Memorial. You are right. Yeah, you're
So
correct.
you get a penny for the coffee. Yeah. You get a penny.
You can choose 1 or 2 or 3. Then there are 3 numbers.
2.
2?
Still penny.
It's not from Dongdaemun, it's from LAX.
Whoa.
Okay. With a bonus, with a photo of Marilyn Monroe. And third question, when is American Independence Day? When is American Independence Day? Jiwon?
Wow.
July 1st. Yeah, 1st of July. So there are 2 gifts left. Number 1 or 3? 3. Come on.
When is our Independence Day?
4th, yeah.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Korean.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Yes, Jewish culture. Lucky charm. Could you show us what it is? Yeah, that is lucky charm. You can find a tiny crown and somewhere between lines. Yeah, it means you are a princess. Think about it. That is lucky charm. I think you better keep it for your lucky day. Last question. This is not the easy one, but think about it. I asked the USA team 2 times about the names. So this is the name. What is the female version of fraternity called? Fraternity is a place when college male students live together. But there is a word, college female students live together. This is not the easy one, but for your hint, I asked them again, right? During the presentation, I asked the USA team about the name. Do you remember? If somebody knows, just call out your name. Yeah, why not try?
but I
You
already
have to
got,
call out your name.
I already got this one.
Oh, yeah, then I think somebody else. It starts with the S.
That's not enough.
얘기해도 돼.
The house for male students, fraternity. But house for female students in the campus, it starts with the S and it pronounced as so. I already gave you an answer. Fraternity and so. So.
Soar.
So more hint, if pronounced sorrow. Sorrow. You cannot get it? Anyone? No? Then no more hint. And what is the answer? What is the answer?
Sorority?
It's sorority. SORORITY. Sorority.
여학생.
Fraternity is for male students, and sorority is for female students in the campus. They live together in a big house.
Male and female.
Yeah.
Trust me, the parties are co-ed. They're all
But
together.
they have a party together, but they live separately. Fraternity and sorority.
Not only.
So we still have one prize. Can you come up with a fifth question? Yes, the team. Any ideas? An easy one.
I got one.
Mm.
Alright. What U.S. state is the Grand Canyon?
What state?
State.
What state is in? You have to call out your name. Jongmin.
Arizona.
Arizona. Is it right? Yes. Same prize with Marilyn Monroe. Yeah. Please keep it up. All right, thank you for your presentation, and we have 10 minutes. We can freely talk about your American campus lives, and you can ask your questions. And starting one, we'll have two special lectures today by Dr. David Rader and Dr. Jedi West. So we will have a 10 minutes break, and we'll have a 10 minutes pre-discussion time. Yeah. Please feel free to have more pizzas.
Hi, I'm Jeff Shin. Oh, hi, Jeff, yes.
I'll be visiting for.
Great.
I'll be looking up for the street.
Oh, so Sam's not here doing it this time.
I'll be doing it.
Good to see you again. Oh,
We met on the cruise.
yeah, that's great.
On the street and in State College. We're there, Sam.
근데 그거를 내가 발표자를 그냥 보내주는데 아침에 문자 보내는데 답장이 없어. 준비했냐고 또 아침에 바뀌는 거 아직까지 안 되는 거야?
Of course. No problem. And yeah, and Sam asked me to give, I mean, originally in the class, the seminar I was going to give in Seattle was going to be around just some basics of statistical inference, but he said, why don't we talk about research? So my topic is going to change when you come next week. It's going to be around a specific research topic. So just so you know, the title's going to be okay. I should be asking you you're coming next week as well. I don't think Sam's coming now, right?
No, he's coming too.
Oh, you're both coming?
Yeah, because he's taking the librarian
Ah.
to use up.
I see.
I'm
You'll we do the students? Yeah.
모를 거예요. 아무도 몰라요.
So like, you could prove that, yeah.
Glad that you can make it. Is it first time?
Oh, yeah, first name is Seattle, but
Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah. We know the culture and all that. Yeah, that's
I don't know why we keep that big city.
Why would you? I think it's one of the big cities over the US, so, coming up with yeah, look at that.
So how about you think, Riker or Raider? This is what we do. When I first came back from Korea, I was amazed at the number of these cuts.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, well, there's
In the US, that would probably be like $100, or at least the effort required would be a lot greater.
Paper is it?
Cloth. It's plastic. Cloth.
Well, I'd like to take my hat home.
Please, yeah, okay. Actually, can we cut it in half?
yeah, sure. And split it.
No, that would be great. I'll take a picture of it. Let's take it.
You can take it as your main souvenir.
I actually will. If you don't mind, I will if we can cut it.
Pin it on your.
I'll take it to the lab. Oh, sorry.
그렇지. 그런 종교 쪽으로. 어떤 의미에서 이렇게 모델한 걸
Good job on the presentation today. Your Mean Girls was one of the top ones. I won't tell you that like it could have been the top one. I never tell them, but it was in the upper 10%. So very good. Both your paper and your presentation.
우리 지금도 내가 일부러 보자고.
Oh yeah, they're far from fast. You should have taken the grade. You should have took a letter grade for it.
할수 있어.
You could have, but
엄청난
we kind of messed up on paper because we didn't really read the thing where it said you had to put the abstract. Don't worry about that. That was my. I didn't mark it off the wrong thing. So no, it really was. It was one of the better ones. There was two other ones I thought were really stellar. You're supposed to.
No, we called her the mean girl.
I always had in mind, I had to put all the names together halfway through the class, and so I thought Mean Girls were all girls. And then I thought, wait, what are you
우리 안에서도 we have a real treat today for all of us because these two professors who came to Seongyuan and Seoul, Korea to teach at our international summer semester have graciously agreed to give yet another talk, okay, out of the busy schedule, okay. We have a fairly small group of students, but it's an eager audience, I hope. And we have two or three, how many of you, okay, two Penn State students. And I'm not really sure whether the students have the opportunity to hear what the writer is going to talk about, but let's give a warm applause to Dr. David Ryder. And sorry about not remembering you, actually, because I'm heading on the street and I was saying, who is this guy? And he said, oh, nice to meet you again. I thought about seeing him on the street.
David looks like a student, so you can't really tell.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Well, I can, thank you, Dr. Kim. I can reciprocate in the sense that I did remember your name, because I've had your business card on my desk for once or twice. Simply because I was so keen on making this happen, coming over here. I'm here for 3 weeks now, teaching the summer school. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I have an awesome time here, so this is great. So thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you for announcing this so prominently. I don't get that at home, right? That's really good. I'm glad I stuck with the title, because that would stand out at this point in time. Now, let me start with a question that I'd like to ask my students at the beginning of anything I'd like to talk about in cognitive science. What do you think makes us human? How come we're not like other animals? What's really special? Is it that we walk upright? Not quite. It's kind of a sad criteria, right? Is it that we speak? Well, you know, my cat says something too. She gets her message across. Are we really smarter than other animals? I tend to show people a video clip of dolphins. Okay? Well, you know, we might be smarter because, you know, we, built Seoul and New York City, right? And now we will build bombs to destroy these cities. And dolphins just swim around in the water having fun, right? And they're going to say we're smarter than anyone else would say. So it's kind of difficult to explain what makes us human. We're certainly generalists. We're certainly more intelligent at some level. And cognitive science, my field, studies a lot of these aspects that really differentiate us in a substantial way from everyone else. And the cool thing is that in the last maybe 50 years or so, we've been given the tremendous opportunity to go beyond classical psychology, or God forbid something like psychoanalysis, to actually study scientifically how thinking works. So we can actually get an inside view, a window into the mind. And these are structural scans of a person that's very close to me. And what we're seeing here is that person's brain sliced through the middle from different angles. Well, we can do better than that. We can actually see the brain in action. So we have different ways to inspect what's happening inside the mind. Even those methods still come with their caveats. Watching blood flow in the brain is very secondary to actual work that's being done. In a second, we're going to see this. The question is, right now here, how can we localize different brain functions? And that's something we're quite good at, actually. So we can use functional MRI studies to figure out, for example, that we've got motor activity being handled up there and visual perception back here, right? All the way to the back of your brain, okay? So this is the front, okay? Frontal lobe over here. Occipital lobe is back here on the inside, so this shows basically the left hemisphere. On the inside of these hemispheres, this is where your, the image gets projected from your eyes. Okay. We know that declarative memory somehow passes through this area in the temporal lobe. We know that we use the frontal lobe to maintain goals, right? To judge what's better, to experience fear and joy. Right? So we know all these things. But does this really tell us how the brain works? So we'd like to figure out how everything works in detail. Right? And that might mean writing a computer program that simulates the mind, step by step, saying, here's what I do first, here's what I do second, and here are the resources that I use. So for example, I might say, okay, if I want to answer the question, who's in the park? I might kick off a memory request, right? And while I wait, I'm going to move my eyes around, I'm going to construct meaning for the sentence because I can start with that. And because my memory hasn't gotten back to me yet, I might blurt out the partial sentence, well, in the park we have, and then my memory comes in, that's going to take another 50 milliseconds to retrieve, and I know a hippie is in the park. Which is one of the sentences out of the classical study. Okay. So if we write a computer program, and of course this is translated so that you and I can understand. But if we write a computer program within a framework that tells me how well memory works, I may well be able to get a little closer to understanding how the mind works. So my approach is to say, the mind, is really a computer. And a computer is a good model for describing, at some level anyway, what happens in the mind in order to, for it to do some tasks. Now the other, more classical approach would be to run an experiment, okay? Because that needs to be done in order to justify my computer program. Okay? Now, the classical perspective on experiments, like behavioral experiments, would be something like this. Right? We can do it with a rat, and indeed we can actually learn a lot from rodents about even how our mind works, our brain works anyway. But it's not quite what experiments look like in real life. And some even say that, well, these smart animals turn things around, right? And they don't experiment with us, right? There's also a famous cartoon of a Skinnerian rat, right, pressing the button saying, wow, every time I press this button, the scientist guy gives me some more cheese. This is awesome, right? So, we're never quite sure. But in principle, if we're studying this, carefully, if we're designing experiments carefully, we can actually draw some conclusions about causality. Like what causes what, right? I change some things in the experiment, keep everything else the same, and I observe the outcome, and I see what comes out of it, okay? So that might be sort of the perspective that a cognitive psychologist would take. We run experiments to test hypotheses that build theory. Now the program I'm engaged in is certainly one of a cycle where you observe from data, and you improve your theory in order to learn something. But in what I'm going to show you today, in many cases I'm not running experiments. And when I do run experiments, I make them big. I don't look at 20 people coming into the lab. No, I look at 1,000, right? Taking it from wherever, anywhere in the world, on their computers. So this is perhaps the big data perspective on cognitive science. And that inspires the models of the mind that we build that are computational. And the neat thing, and I'm going to show you one project later on, the neat thing is that you can actually use some of these ideas out of cognitive science to improve algorithms used by computer scientists. So we're actually improving techniques such as machine learning using inspiration from cognitive science. Now, what do I mean by big data in this context? Now, one of my core interests is language. So how do we study language using big data? Well, we get inspired by computer science in what has made computational linguistics so, great and useful in the past 15 years, really, maybe 20 years. It's corpora. A corpus is a collection of data. It's a collection of language data. These are sometimes massive, more than 1 million words. And they contain text or transcribed speech. And this transcription can be important. Right? That means there's a lot of work that goes into these data sets, so these data sets can be shared by a lot of researchers. But it's for that reason, we're not looking at terabyte-sized data, like what Jenner would actually use. Right? Our notion of big data, is around, is at that magnitude. Right? But what's important is that we can actually infer models from that. So we've got millions of linguistic decisions. What word do I choose? What is my sentence structure? What do I say when? And so on, that are encoded in the language in a corpus. And sometimes we will know something about the people that write these things and that say these things. And that's very useful because it lets us draw conclusions that contribute to many areas, including social psychology or computational social science. Or in this case, to linguistics. Now I'm going to talk very briefly about something that all of us experience, meetings. And, oftentimes meetings don't work so well, right? We talk and we talk, and maybe we listen or maybe we just check Facebook. And in the end, we're not all that productive. So the question is, what can increase our productivity? How do we make ourselves more effective? And I'm going to put up a somewhat provocative thesis. It says, the solution to inefficient collaboration is forgetting. Not forget about the meeting. But it's more like purge information out of your memory that's no longer important. So this kind of forgetting is what I'm going to talk about next few slides. Okay, so let's get back to simulating the mind and the programs that we write, because that tells us something about what kind of forgetting I'm talking about here. So you may have heard of declarative memory, sort of a memory type that we have in our minds that store facts, okay? Such as American Independence Day is on July 4th. Okay, that would be a fact that we store in there. Now, in order to retrieve that, so if I've got the question, when is Independence Day? I would fill in what I have into working memory and kick off a retrieval, okay, to go to working memory. So that goes basically from the frontal portion of your brain to the temporal portion on the side of your brain, the left side. And it's going to get to work on that. That's going to take a while. Okay, that might take 100 milliseconds, maybe 150 milliseconds, until the answer comes back. Okay. And while you're doing that, the other portions of your brain may do something else. Now, the interesting question, of course, is, do we actually remember? Okay? Is it going to come back? And Act R, which is this framework that we're working with here, actually describes whether something's going to come back or how likely it is to come back using this formula. So we can actually say, okay, in most cases we're going to remember this fact, we're not going to remember that fact, and what does it depend on? It depends on when it was last presented, when it was last used. Okay, and this is what we're plotting here. So every time we're using something, the activation goes up. Over time, it slowly goes up as well, right? But it decays very briefly, very quickly. Right? So in that rapid decay, you could consider as forgetting, because if you just wait and you don't use your piece of knowledge, you'll forget. All right. So I would argue that forgetting is a factor of task success because it allows memory in individuals to decay and forget things that are no longer relevant given the environment. Okay? And the decay function that R proposes is about like this. Okay? That happens over time. Now, if we're applying this to language and the study of how people produce natural language, we can look at different representational levels that describe language. Right? You know how we have to choose words, right? And that's somewhat different from how we combine these words in order to produce a well-formed sentence. That's actually English or Korean or Mandarin or whatever. Right? In the end, we have to speak it. Right? And that again is language dependent, right? And it's independent of the sentence structure. Right? We can build sentences and we can write them instead. What to say is something I have to choose earlier on. Right? So I have to make memory accesses and I have to figure out, what do I want to actually say. And the idea is that adaptation at these different levels leads to successful dialogue. Right? And that was Pickering and Garrett's thesis. That was a fairly influential hypothesis that was put out there more than 10 years ago now. And they said that we're really just copying each other's words. We're copying each other's sentence structures. And that's really simple to do. And because of that, we are going to be successful. So we set out to test this hypothesis. I'm going to show you how that pans out at the sentence structure level. So if you say something like Alice picked up the book, and later on you want to express one of these sentences, you're more likely to take this sentence, Bob dropped off the kids. As you see, the word off is in this position, and the word up is in this position. While in the alternative variant, Alice picked the book up, the up goes to the end. These sentences mean the same thing. So later on, if you would want to say something like this, and you had said this before, you're going to say Bob dropped the kids off. And this works for all sorts of syntactic configurations, all sorts of sentence structure choices. Okay? Active passive might be something that's appreciated by non-linguists as well. The effect doesn't last. It mostly goes away after a few seconds. Right? So we're actually seeing some sort of decay here. Now if we're looking at what this looks like in a corpus, and we're using two corpora here where people talk to each other spontaneously, and another corpus where people actually do a task together, we can observe the same kind of decay, or similar decay to the decay function that R proposes. Right? So a few seconds after the last use of a rule, the probability of it being reused again goes down. So that's something that we see. I mean, we have to use syntactic system, a grammar from some grammar theory and so on. So there's a lot that actually goes into that, right? But the bottom line is really this. And if you look at how strongly it goes down, how strongly it decays, you'll find that in task-oriented dialogue it's stronger than in switchboard. You find that between speakers it's quite strong actually. While between speakers in spontaneous conversation, it's not as strong. And that seems to suggest that there's more decay and possibly more priming in task-oriented dialogue compared to spontaneous conversation. But of course, this is observational, so we can't really draw as many conclusions from it because we're not really manipulating things, so we're not actually testing the hard question, does it make us more successful? Okay. Now, let's look at that. We can do that too. If we're looking at a corpus that had people carry out a task where they had to find a path around all of these landmarks. There were always two people. One was given a map like this with the different landmarks and a path drawn. And the other person was given the same landmarks but no path. So the other person had to recreate the path. And they would draw something like this here. Okay, what you see in red here. Okay, you see they make a mistake here, a mistake there, and a mistake up there, but overall they're pretty good. And they're kind of sloppy here. Okay. Now if we take the difference between the two paths, we have a measure of task success. We know how well they did in that task. Okay? Alright, so now if we look at task success down here and adaptation at the syntactic level up here, we actually see that there's a slope, there's a correlation between the two. Okay? And a correlation that turns out to be significant if you do some statistical modeling. Okay? The correlation on its own it's a relatively small correlation, of course. Right? We wouldn't expect much more. But because we have that prediction coming out of the theory, we can test this now. And we can say, is there a correlation between the two in the right direction? And there is. Long-term adaptation is correlated with task success. The more people adapt to one another, the more they seem to be successful at the actual task that we're talking about. And of course, this is something we can use from a computer science perspective as well, because sometimes we'd like to figure out whether whether dialogue is going to be successful in the future. Okay? So, perhaps we can look at how much they adapt to one another early on. Right? So that's quite useful from an applied perspective. Okay. So we're taking this a little further. We look at this kind of adaptation at different levels. Okay? We're ignoring the syntactic level for now, and we're going up. And we're saying, is your basic intent, does this adapt to? Do people adapt to one another in terms of what they want to say? We can find that too. And there we're looking at the Cancer Survivors Network, which is a corpus that we have generated from more than 10 years of conversations between cancer patients that meet at this online forum here, run by the American Cancer Society. And they help each other out. Okay? So we're looking at a number of interesting things here, and actually the students involved in this project are Yang Xu and Yafei Wang. So we're taking about 3,000 thread conversations from this CSN data set. Now let's look at alignment first. Okay? Syntactic left and lexical on the right. Is there alignment between people? And you can see that these two distributions are significantly different from each other. Okay? In both cases. Okay? Here it's a little harder to see, but it turns out that they're significantly different. And here it's pretty evident. So we see that there's actually alignment between them. And of course we have to pick up a control case, which is the blue line, which is where we're just mixing up threads, language from different threads, okay, where you have natural repetition. You always have natural repetition. Just statistically you would expect that. Right? To contrast from that chance repetition, we look at repetition within a thread. Okay? So repetition within a thread against repetition between threads. And then you find that there actually is significantly more repetition within the thread than between the threads. Okay? So we do find alignment. And the cool thing is that people align regardless of who they're talking to, regardless of whether that's the person that they're talking to that has asked the question. They're aligning to just everybody. And it decays for everybody in the same way. So that is theoretically quite interesting as well, because it means we're not aligning in order to be understood, in order to reach this common goal of common understanding. We're just doing it quite naturally. The outcome is that we reach a common understanding, so it's good. But like with many heuristics and biases in cognitive science, in human behavior, we're just choosing a shortcut as opposed to trying to be perfect. Right? So I don't care who I align to, I just align to everything around me. Right? And the outcome of that is positive. It's usually quite useful. But using this big data approach, we can actually show that we're not discriminative in terms of who we align to. Now the last question that I promised to ask here is, well, let's look at what to say as opposed to how to say. And here we're distinguishing informational versus emotional support in that corpus. So something like, I pray for you every night and send you hugs and encouragement and so on. This is emotional support, right? This is a display of empathy. But on the other hand, I'm having a similar problem, however not ready for biopsy, those areas, if you can tolerate pain, waiting for new drugs to come, that will be managed. So you see, this is an informational support. Now we produced classifiers that can automatically distinguish between the two. Right? And assign a score. How informational are you? How emotional are you? It'd be interesting to see whether people actually adapt to one another, whether the thread goes in one direction. Right? So if we look at that, we actually find that there's alignment for support type. Okay? So if the first person responding in a thread starts out on an emotional trajectory, they're all emotional, and everyone else will chime in, and the thread will become emotional. If the first person is informational, then the thread tends to be more informational. The other thing we find is that over time, threads become less informational, okay, more emotional, which is something that's in line with what we know about language in general. Okay, entropy goes up, okay, information goes down. Okay, towards the end of a thesis, there's always less information. Towards the end of a sentence, there's less information. Towards the end of a paragraph, a chapter, there's less information at the end. It becomes more predictable. Right? From a statistical point of view, information theory. So we find something similar here, but on top of that, we find that people seem to align at that end. Okay. All right. Next step. Remember, I talked about this research program for sort of inspiring, taking some inspiration from cognitive science and contributing to computer science. I'll show you fairly briefly some of the recent contributions that we made. I haven't really talked. It's actually the first time I'm talking about this. So you could probably imagine that the way we process our vision, process visual information, is that we're starting out with sort of very detailed information. We're looking at the small details and we're recognizing contrasts and lines and colors. But we go up to more complex things like motion, for example, that we detect. And over time, we end up at something much more complex, like recognizing actual objects. Okay? So we're building up structure, right? And we're learning to recognize things, in terms of a hierarchy of structure. So, and that basically means there is internal structure to how the mind recognizes the world, because we think that the processes that generate that internal structure that we're seeing, are also structured. So can we use some of these principles and transfer them to computer science, where we have a computer that learns things? So it's not no longer us and our brain learning, it's actually our computer learning. Now we have to take a big step from, in terms of the formalities here. And we look at networks, okay? And here we're looking at neural networks that learn things. And the fascinating thing that happened in the years since about 2006, we have become able to actually train these complex neural networks that have multiple inner layers that describe multiple hierarchical layers of structural representation. And if you train such a model and you add some cognitively inspired changes to that, in terms of how the connections are made, what layers are connected when, in what order do you train this, what tricks, of course, do you use in order to facilitate training here. We found that we can get this neural network to recognize things like images, or understand what the web page is about, to categorize web pages. So we can build something, for example, classifiers, and we can do so with a minimum amount of data. This is a so-called semi-supervised approach that allows you to actually learn from very few examples. And interestingly, this is what babies can do too, right? They started with very few examples, and then they don't actually get labels for objects. No baby is told that this is water, okay? Babies just infer that, right, as they learn it. So, just like human beings, we wanted our machine learning system to be able to actually recognize things and learn to recognize things from just observing, right? Not from being told what the different items are, in terms of the image data set, for example, or in terms of the website data set. So you're just told a few examples, maybe 10 examples, and then you go on and you keep learning, and you hopefully keep getting better. Now let's take a look at how well that worked. And this plots error, right? So you see error goes down as we're getting more and more examples that we learn from. And there are different approaches that were tested here. And the orange one is an existing approach, and that was the existing state of the art, right? And you see that at the beginning, the blue line, okay, which was our first approach, actually was worse than the state of the art, but you see that over time, it was much better than the state of the art. And the green line here, okay, and this is an autoencoder, and I don't want to go into so much detail here, but the green line here actually does a lot better right away. And you see that both of them end up doing really quite well in the end. So we can use some of these principles to improve in the field. It's not called deep learning. Okay? It's deep because it's got many different hierarchical layers that we're learning. Okay? So we're building a brain. Okay, and this is work by Alex Ororia, who's my student at Penn. All right. Now this was just a brief example of how we can go the other way. Okay. Now I wanted to show you a couple more things, a couple more other projects. So the last, actually, this is I think the last development project I'll talk about. This is about decision making. Now, of course, the mind, what the mind does and how we behave in the world isn't just all about language. Sometimes we actually have to do and not just talk about it. Right? And I hope we all do more and we talk less. So I'll give you this hypothetical situation here, where you are in the car and you're parked there. Okay? Or perhaps you're the cyclist. It works for both. And the question is, how often do you turn around to check whether the cyclist is still in that position? Or if you're the cyclist, how often do you check on the car to make sure the car is still there and the car is not trying to turn in front of you? As you see, he's got his right turn signal on, and he might actually turn and he might cut off that cyclist. And that cyclist is just a little further behind him. That driver has to check his blind spot a lot. Right? And the question is, how often do you do that and when do you do that? Because if you do it too often, you might not pay attention to other things that are also important. Right? So you can't look all the time. Right? You also got to choose the right point in time to do that. Right? So what you're doing is you're actually interacting with an environment that is uncertain. You're making decisions under uncertainty. And interestingly, this is where we have a lot of biases. We're known to make mistakes. We're known not to choose the optimal behavior. So here we look at timing decisions. Okay? So this is about when to act as opposed to how to act. And in the past, the big work in that field has been done on how to act. We're interested in when to act. Now, in such cases, checking more often is costly, as I said. Okay, might be just cognitive load, might be actual expenses. So this is not just things like in traffic. Checking early might be inefficient. Checking late might make you miss the event, depending on what's happening there. So understanding the probabilities in the outside environment is crucial in order to make good decisions here. And understanding probabilities is just something we're not very good at. So what mistakes do we make here? And there are many examples for that kind of decision making. For example, in cybersecurity, in national security, in public safety. Public safety, like you have an old bridge that's getting older, right? At what point in time do you want to renovate it, right? Can you get another year out of that bridge? But if you're just a year too late, the bridge might collapse and might kill a lot of people and cause a lot of damage and cost and so on. So you don't want to go that far. So you have to sort of judge this trade-off in terms of risks. Now, we're experimenting with this using games, two-player games. So two people play this game here. And each of them gets to decide when to check. Okay? And these are sort of these dots that you see here, red checks and blue checks. Every time I check, I can make a blue bar. I can start a blue bar. It's going from left to right, okay? And the game basically develops here, right? So you're checking, right? And the funny thing is you don't actually see whether the other person is checking, right? You just see after the fact once you've checked yourself. Right? So that's the uncertainty that we're seeing in this game. And this has been proposed as a game called Flip It. Has been proposed as a game that simulates or reflects a lot of security decision making. Okay? So our objective is to maximize our blue bar here. Okay? And in this case, there's a big red bar because we're not checking here, right? And that means that the red player wins here. Okay? So we're playing these games. Perhaps we can get people to reveal some interesting behavior or some interesting differences in personality. So we'd like to find out how people play this game. Now again, we're not, the classical psychology approach would be to bring in 20 people and just run with it. But we'd like to run 400 participants, maybe 1,000 participants when we play this game. So we can actually look at finer grained nuances and more effects, more interactions and so on. And we can do that thanks to crowdsourcing techniques, particularly Amazon Mechanical Turk, which allows us to run participants remotely, and so we don't have to bring them into the lab. In the following, I'm interested in individual differences. What's different between people? Are some people better than others? I'm going to show you just a few results here. One thing we looked at, and that's my collaborator Jens Grossweis at Penn State. So one thing that we looked at here is the so-called need for cognition. This is something that quantifies whether people like to think deeply about problems as opposed to make intuitive decisions. So, do you make your decisions out of your belly, or do you like to think through everything? And we can ask people in a survey. We're not going to ask them this directly, but we're giving them hypothetical situations. We ask them how they think about it, and that's been developed and validated by others. Okay? So we're taking such a survey, we're asking them, what is your need for cognition is what we're assessing. And if you basically distinguish between people that are thinkers, that have a high NFC, and people that are not thinkers and they're intuitive decision makers, right? You actually see a distinctive difference between how well they do in this game. You see that people do well, okay, if they like to think it through deeply, and they they don't do so well if they don't think it through. Right? So intuitive decision making here is actually to your disadvantage. You want to think about it. The next thing we wanted to look at was risk propensity. Do people like to take risks? And again, we can assess that using a survey. And what we found was that, low risk takers, people that take it a bit more conservatively, also do a bit better at this game. Right? So there's a correlation between risk propensity and how well you do. Inverse correlation. So in this game, you don't want to take risks. You want to take it slow and you want to think about it. Okay? Now the problem is that this doesn't only go so far. That means it doesn't help you if you like to actually think everything through, okay? And then you also take it very slow and you're risk averse. You don't take risks. Okay? The risk aversion, again, is measured by the survey, right? And here we're looking at the round payment. Okay? So if you're risk averse, okay, and you do like things through, okay, which is the red one, you actually don't have much of an advantage over somebody who doesn't like to think things through, right? And if you're a risk seeker, sort of on the right-hand side of this graph here, it also doesn't matter so much whether you're high or low NFC. But it matters if you're an average risk taker. Okay? If you're judicious about your risk. Not too risky, okay, and not too conservative, just average. And that point in time, this is when you benefit from thinking it through. And that was quite interesting because it teaches us something about how the different personality traits interact and how they lead to better or worse decisions. Most people in cognitive psychology and in behavioral economics have seen this decision-making task and the decision-making models mostly as models that describe the average human. And I'd like to go beyond that. Don't take average humans for granted. Everyone's quite different. So we need to look at these differences. Now the last thing we found, what we looked at, was impatience, and that's my student Moojan Ghafouri. And she's been looking at, can we make people more impatient in these tasks? And we gave people a countdown before the game, okay? And it just said, saving your choices, or saving game, and it counted down, 50, 40, 30, 10, 11, and so on. In every case, we counted down 15 seconds, right? But we had several conditions. Sometimes we counted down from 50, but sometimes we just counted down from 5. Okay? So it's like 5, 4, You see how impatient you're getting? Okay, and this is what we're observing here as well. Okay, and it's actually a very nice order. If we're looking at how many checks people do in the game, how they behave in that game, they make a lot of checks. Right? If they're made impatient. Okay? And if they're not impatient, they take their time. Okay? That doesn't mean they do better up here. Right? 0 is actually where you should be. Right? To play, the ideal game. But we're not all that interested in, how well they do in the game here. We're interested in, how often do they check. So this is a very nice result. It's a very nice order of building. Impatient people make more checks, and we can make you impatient just using that countdown. And that has implications, again, not just for cognitive science, but also for a field like human-computer interaction. Okay? How do you design your countdowns that you show people? Right? If it's not moving much, right, and it's taking a long time, that's not good, right? It's going to bias people towards making bad decisions later on. So I'm going to leave you with a quote by Alan Newell. I have got to know how the gears clank and how the pistons go. And he said that because he wanted to know all the details. He wanted to have computational models that describe how all of these effects come to be. And I take it to say that it's very important that we don't just look at data, that we don't just make use of these great experimental facilities, that we don't just make use of all the big data that we have, but that we actually draw inferences that teach us something about the theory of how everything works. Because the theory is a description of how things work. The data or statistical models by themselves, they don't tell us anything. They don't tell us the mechanisms. And we need to go for the mechanisms if we actually want to do science. I'll leave you with that. There's my collaborators, students, funders that have made this work possible. If you've got any questions right now, I think we have maybe 5 minutes or so. 2 minutes. Oh, all right. Okay.
We're going to be done too, so.
And I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
So what do you think, I guess for many of you, this thing just over your head, right? I have this observation. What you have just described seems to be, on the one hand, it's very deep because it deals with how we think, right? How we process the world. But on the other hand, the level that we're operating at the moment is very shallow, low, right? We concentrate on really simple stuff, right? But then we can make a big jump. Okay? Right? These are the principles that we are able to observe, right? So, so I think there is a lot of work to be done, right? That's what I'm getting at.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think we're just scratching the surface of really understanding what happens in the mind. There are billions of neurons. But I've taught this so far, so much. We have shifted from trying to understand what every single neuron does. Just like you don't try to understand what every single transistor does on the CPU. We shifted towards understanding the learning mechanisms that create the models that can then recognize a person or an object. So it's not so important to look at what the outcome of the training process is and how everything is adjusted and how every neuron talks to one another, right? That is just the model, right? But what's important is understanding the training process that generates the model and being able to come up with a computational explanation. That means being able to program it so a computer can do it. And this is perhaps for computer science and cognitive science we can get.
Are there any particular questions you want to ask? Yes.
It's a little bit different for your main theme, but I am a statistics major, so I have a question that I was interested in neural networks. So if you do your research research with your network model, then you should choose the weight of hitting those or kind of difficult things. Then you yourself, you do those tasks yourself, or do it other statistician or physician.
Who do you collaborate
Yeah.
with? Okay.
On the neural network stuff, it's mostly driven by Alexander Orovia, who's one of my students. Of course, he goes out and collaborates with people that like to do deep learning in that specific area of deep learning. So we work with these people. We also work with people that do, someone that does scholarly big data, for example. He's a trained physicist, but he's been around for a long time. And a lot of these things you can learn by programming, right? You learn something by implementing it, right? And that's what Alex has been doing, right? So we have, developed, our own frameworks that implement everything, right? Instead of just taking something off the shelf. Sure, anyone can download this and just use it. But if you can program it, you actually truly understand what it's about and how it works. Right? So that's perhaps the approach. And then there's sort of a collaboration for other components, like lower level libraries, like how do you interface with the hardware. Like we're just getting specialized GPU hardware to do this learning more quickly so we can run more experiments. And of course it comes with some layers of software, right, that we will not implement because we're not interested in the connection to how the GPU works, right? So of course we have a scientific community that provides these things so everyone can use them. And that's where it's very important that people make the fruit of their work accessible to everybody so people can download and use it and then build upon it as opposed to having to start from scratch with everything even if they're not interested. Okay? So it's that kind of collaboration that is happening.
Okay. Our next speaker is Dr.